Okay, good. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call to order the Southeastern Utah Watershed Council. It's April 14th. It's 10 a.m. This meeting is slated from 10 to 12, but if we get done sooner, that'd be wonderful for all involved. So thank you all for coming, and thanks to those online. Really quickly, I'd just like to go around and do a quick roll call, and we'll get the people online too. So I'm Tricia Dean. I'm with the Payne County Commission.
Carly Payne, Watershed Council's coordinator with the Division of Water Resources.
I'm Steph McGinnis, Division of Water Resources. I'm the new state water plant manager.
Bill Winfield, Grand County Commissioner. Gary Wilson, Grand Water.
Jack Heinzman, Area Planning Specialist, Division of Water Resources.
Lucy Lambs, Moab, Strategic Initiatives and Sustainability. Dana Van Horn, Frank County.
Arnie Holtquist, Watershed Coordinator for Grand San Juan Counties.
Ben Musselman, Groundwater.
DNR Charles, Sinopua, West City.
Matt McDonald, San Juan County Administrator.
I'm Cash Stallings. I'm the Regional Engineer for the Division of Water Rights.
Corey Farnsworth, USU Extension.
Cara Dornwent, from Restoration and Green Conservation District.
So, and then Lori, you're online. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, Lori Mon, San Juan County Commissioner.
Great. And I think that's it. Is that correct, Dana? Is there anybody else online? Okay, great. All right. Thanks so much. We'll just open it up to public comment. Is there anybody from the public here to comment? I think so. All right. So our first action item is approval of minutes from January 13th, 2025. Those are attached. So if you want to just take a moment to look through those. Thanks, Max, for getting those together. Awesome. You really need to be looked at. Is that the level that I have to rise?
No, so on here, it'll transcribe for you as well.
Oh,
So
great.
part of it is Google.
I'll make the motion to approve as written.
We have a motion by Bill Wisdom. May I have a second?
Sure.
And a second by Artie. And then we'll just all in favor.
Any corrections in the Bureau of Reclamation?
Is there some corrections needed?
I mean, the Bureau of Reclamation.
Page 2.
Page 2.
Paragraph.
That's the Bureau. Thought there was one other, but I didn't circle it when I saw it, so I don't know where to find.
Dana usually catches those.
Well, what I did catch is that I didn't discuss how the Watershed Restoration Initiative helped establish a wildfire response fund. I think that was probably Cara, not me.
Or maybe Tony.
It might have been Tony.
It might have been Tony.
Okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't me.
Okay.
I don't know nothing about said thing.
I know what it
exists,
is,
but I-
Tony, thank you so much. Thank you.
That sounds
Awesome. And really quick, while you guys are perusing, Ken, do you want to introduce yourself? Online?
told me he was doing taxes today.
Okay, well, Ken is here from the Moab Irrigation.
Howdy, folks. Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you.
Kind of multitasking a little bit. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, I bet you are. So we had a couple of minor edits.
Bottom of page 2, Grand County, not Grand.
Okay.
That was under Ken Miner's motion.
Okay, thanks. And we'll make those minor edits. So we have a first and a second. All in favor? Looks like it passed fairly unanimously. Lukewarm reception to that. All right. And just a reminder, if you have not done your OPMA training, Carly, are they supposed to send that to you, the certificate? What's the best, you know? Or do we just keep them?
The chair is responsible
Okay.
to ensure they're done. If you want to copy me on them, that's fine. Yeah.
Send us an
All right.
email or
I
you want
will.
to send to,
I
please.
will. I'll do that. I'll do that.
Thanks.
I'll send out a reminder. That's my job back. I'm on it. I got it. Okay, will do. All right, so let's go ahead and move on. So we have Steph McGinnis, am I saying that correctly? From the state water, she is the state water plan manager and I'm gonna take over. Do you have a presentation?
I do. I'd like to share some slides and I appreciate you all giving me time on the agenda today. So what I'd like to do, I just have a really short presentation just to give you a little bit of background and information on the state water plan. And then if we have time, we can maybe have some general discussion. So there's been a couple of sort of updates to how the water plan is updated. So I do want to just talk a little bit about what those are, sort of how we're going about developing the state water plan. Talk to you about the timeline. We're on a tight one for this next iteration, and then how we're engaging with you all, with the public. So a couple of things that I want to highlight is House Bill 280 was passed in the 2024 legislative session. And if you're really into code, that is where you can look up everything to do with the state water plan. But a couple of things that I do want to highlight is in code, it now outlines the frequency of updates. So we are required to update the plan no less frequently than every 10 years. We do have an internal goal to be updating the plan about every 5 years. And this next iteration, like I said, we're on a really tight timeline. I wish we had 5 years, but we'll have a completed plan by December of 2026. And the other thing that was called out that's important is the increased collaboration. At the state level, there are a handful of partners that are required to participate with the development of state water plan. And it's worth noting here that there are several divisions within the Department of Natural Resources, as well as the Department of Environmental Quality, that are participating with us. At the local level, of course, we're working with you all. We're also working with the Water Conservancy districts. We've asked the Water Conservancy districts to sort of work with their local council, and so we can sort of feed all of that material up to us. And so, you know, we may have some individual meetings with the Conservancy districts as well, but certainly we're working with you all. And these are just the entities that are called out. Of course, we're working with other groups that are interested and trying to engage the public as well in the process. So before I get too much into sort of the development, just a couple of things that I want to touch on with the state water plan. My hope is that we'll make this a document that's going to provide some strategy and actionable steps for now and into the future as we're planning at the individual, local, and state level. We'll be looking at water supply right now, looking at water demand in the future. And we want to be able to foster all of the folks that live here in Utah. So our communities, our agriculture, our recreation. And this is some text that was pulled from the last plan that was put out in 2021. And I think we really need to be thinking about this as we're developing this next plan. We're seeing drier conditions, we're seeing more extreme weather events. As you all know, Great Salt Lake hit a record low in July of 2021. And then it seems like we turned right around and we saw a record-setting snowpack in the winter of 2022 into 2023. And certainly Colorado River Basin supply is a big issue. We've been concerned about that and we continue to be concerned about that. So at this point, we do have an outline. And we can talk about that in a moment when we're down here if you all would like to. I'll be sharing that with you, but I do have some printed copies if we want to discuss generally that outline. But right now it's broken down into 9 chapters. And sort of a spoiler alert to be aware of is we're shooting for a total document length of about 150 pages. So that is going to be a whole lot of information that's going to be put into a tiny amount of real estate. And just to give you an idea of sort of the structure, those first few chapters are really sort of outlining the constraints of water here in Utah. So, we don't have control over precip. So we'll be talking about what is our supply, and we'll be looking at future uncertainty. So with changes, maybe in temperature, things like that, how will that affect our supply and our demand? Also, a little bit more in our control, but how does policy, law, how does that all affect how water is used here? And then under all of those constraints, how can we satisfy the needs of our communities, our agriculture, and then also our and so keep these 3 chapters in mind, because I do want to go into a little bit more depth on this chapter 8, the space and perspective chapter. So my goal is, with all of the local watershed councils, we're going to have some of the space in the state water plan allocated to really talk specifically about what is going on at the local level in each of these basins. My hope is that you all provide comment on the entire document, but I do want to highlight this because I think that this is really important. And what I would like to do with each of these local watershed councils is really focus in on what are the problems that you all are facing. What are some of the solutions that we can look at and talk about that in the state water plan. And then, because I don't want this to feel like this is all doom and gloom in chapter 8, I really would like to highlight some sort of a project or effort that you all would like to maybe elevate to that level of the state water plan. And what I think is really important about the state water plan at this local level is this is something that will be, handed to the legislators. This will be able to help you all to really highlight what are the challenges and needs, and maybe move all forward on what you all need, which, funding is a big one, right? And this would be a way to maybe sort of highlight this. Again, Division of Water Resources, we are not a regulatory agency, but, there are things, and my understanding is watershed councils is something that sort of came out of this process of highlighting needs and elevating that up to the policymakers. So you will have a survey coming your way soon. We are dangerously close to having this polished up and ready to go out to all of our different councils. And I want to talk about this again because that spoiler alert that I gave you of 150 pages with all of the local watershed councils will have, I'm thinking about 2 to 3 pages to really highlight what's going in. So we're really going to need to be very strategic about what are all of the issues and how can we sort of package that up that will cover everything. So this is just a super generic example. But let's say in the survey, someone identifies that groundwater depletion is an issue, which I believe is actually an issue in this area. How would we take that information and package that up? So really what I would do is I would say we've got a challenge of aquifer depletion, declining groundwater levels, how I would like to word that. And then what would be maybe a need that you all would identify? So maybe we need to better understand what the recharge sources are, the rates. Maybe we need to determine, would aquifer storage and recovery be an option? Again, this is very generic. This is something that I'm showing to all of the councils, but just to get you all thinking of what you might be put in the survey as an answer, and then how we might really elevate that and sort of bring that down. This is another one. Maybe we're talking about infrastructure. I will say, remember I asked you to keep those 3 chapters in mind, the community, the productive ag, and then those healthy watersheds. As you're thinking about challenges and needs and successes when you're filling out that survey, if you can really think about how you would bend those into each. So that last one I gave, that was kind of just on one topic. This one here, this example, we're talking about infrastructure, but we're also talking about increased temps in a local creek. So I would ask if you're, that you would sort of break this out where you would talk about infrastructure in sort of one area. You'll be able to add as many challenges as you would like. So I think it'll be easier for us to really take a look at those survey results if you can kind of put each of those issues, each of those successes into sort of a different bit, if that makes sense. Also on that survey, I'll ask you if it's okay if we reach out to you. And this example is one place where I would really like to reach out to you. I'd want to know, okay, what is that threatened species? And what is that creek that you're sharing with us? So if we can have that back and forth, that would be ideal. And this is how I would break this down. I'd sort of elevate this up to how we would cover this. We would talk about aging infrastructure, water quality concerns, and maybe we're looking for funding to update the infrastructure. Maybe we're looking for better management tools to mitigate. And again, a success, and this could be, I think, maybe the most challenging part. Again, we don't have a lot of real estate within the state water plan, but can we all come to an agreement? And I don't want to be the judge and jury. I would like to leave this all in your hands of what you all feel is important and what to cover. But, you know, is something that we can agree on, a partnership, a project, something that's been positive for the So engagement, again, we're on a pretty tight timeline here. So right now I'm trying to meet with all of the local watershed councils to just sort of get this idea rolling of how we might work on the state water plan together. My hope is to have public scoping meetings as well in each basin, sort of late summer and early fall. Then we'll be taking all of that information from you, from the public scoping comment. We'll be trying to put this together into a document. Our hope is to actually have a final first draft by December of 2025, which will be top. We'll be putting that back out to you all for comment. But the plan is next summer to have what we consider to be a final draft. And then we'll put that to public comment, see if the public also feels that this is a final draft. And then again, publication ready. December of 2026. So that to me is a really tight timeline. Next iteration, we'll have a lot more time, I think, to kind of work together. And so we can be thinking about ideas of what we might want to do next time. So with that, I have a couple of just sort of shameless asks for help. And I don't expect either of these to be heavy lifting because you would probably be wondering what you're signing yourself up for if you do offer to help. With the basin perspective, what I would like is to have just a subset of folks that can help to look over those survey results and sort of help to read all of them and then elevate them up into kind of those more general topics. And then we can discuss what we might want to elaborate on in that. So with that, I think, again, I don't want to be the judge and jury. I would really like for you all to be making those decisions of what's important at the local level. But I would like to then maybe meet with you once or twice to just sort of discuss sort of what you all are thinking, what are those common themes. If anyone loves to write, you are welcome to help write this section, but I think that that's potentially a heavy ask. So what we would want is just kind of a conversation and maybe some bullet points of what you all would like to see in that section. And then we'll take it over, we'll write it, and then we'll hand it back over to you all and ask you, did we hit the mark? What do we need to change? What do we need to update? So that's what I envision there. With the public scoping, again, I want this to be a pretty light lift. It would be helping to identify a good suitable venue for this public meeting. What would be just sort of a good day and time. And then I would also hope that some of you at least could attend that public meeting because I think having that local representation there is really important to help facilitate that meeting and that conversation.
What was your timeline for that again? June, you said?
So with the basin perspective, that survey should be coming out in the next few weeks. Hopefully next week. We're really close. And then I would just ask that you all start filling that out. If people sign up to help, the QR code, you can also email me. You could email Carly. I would be trying to set something up fairly soon, just to, give you all some time to look over those survey results. But then, yeah, that would be you just virtually just to discuss it. With the public scoping, I'm hoping for July, August, September to hold that meeting. And we can push into October if there's some reason, yes.
Oh, go ahead.
But that's kind of loosely what I'm shooting for, because again, we would like to have that final first draft by December of this year. And so it would be nice to my hope is that what the public comes to in this meeting is probably what you all have already highlighted as issues, but I want to hear what,
September's lovely.
yes.
July and August, not so.
Yeah, my mountain bike would love to come down, for that meeting. So, yeah.
I'll help with the surveys.
So Steph, on the survey, are you envisioning anybody who wants to take it individually, not as a council?
I am envisioning for the survey for the council. Now, if you all feel like maybe you would like to ship it out again to, maybe your contacts that you think would have valuable, I think that would be fine. But we probably would sort of identify who's council and who's not, just so as you all are discussing.
So to clarify, you want
Yeah.
everyone on the council.
I would love it. if
Yeah,
everyone-
separate.
So,
Yes. Okay. And then as far as, that's exactly like.
That's a tall ask. To try to get
I mean,
that, yeah,
right.
just different perspective.
Yeah. And then as far as the public scoping, do you envision having maybe one in Grand and one in San Juan? Because we can facilitate that if you want them split, which might be easier for both of us.
if you all think that that would be best
Okay.
is to hold two, I think we could definitely do that.
Okay.
I think my preference, just because we're trying to do all of the local watershed councils in
Right.
just a few months, that maybe we could do them sort of stack them. maybe
Yeah, we
back
could
to
stack
back,
them.
So it
Yeah,
would be.
we can stack them. Okay.
If we can work on that, that.
Yeah, we could, the two of us could.
Because it'd be good to get it down to the water districts and.
Yeah.
have their input on
Yeah.
that help with that survey and that.
And that would be really fantastic too. I mean, another just part of that light lifting is to just help spread the word on this, to make sure that we have the right folks.
Yeah.
And it's just this region, it's so expansive that there's gonna be different needs in different areas, and so it'd be good to push that out as far and wide as we can.
Yeah, and the West Colorado group, they've got that same issue. They've got
Yes.
a lot of landscape to cover. So yeah, I think that we can definitely make that happen.
Yeah, I'll send the three, I'll send an email to the three of us and start
With the
working on
slide deck, yeah, we can get that out. Push it out.
I'll send you.
Any other questions at this point? Just kind of just high level, general or logistics on sort of what I'm hoping you all can help with, that we can work on together with the state water plan.
Yeah, we can definitely push it out to, because Ben, you guys have a resource to send the survey out feasibly via,
Like the public scoping.
right, yeah. Cool. Resources like that through their special service district. We can definitely get it out.
Carly, is there anyone on this council from Green River?
Let me look. I have a list.
I think Green's in the
Green River.
watershed.
So they kind of split, right?
Right.
So if you look at the boundaries, if you're in Green River on the west side of the Colorado, you go to the West Council. But there are a lot of farms and major canals on the east side of the Green.
I believe our watersheds aren't, our watershed councils aren't like hydrologic basins strictly. So for our basins, our watershed council basins, I think there is a crop out of Green River that goes to the west.
Yeah, it's a little weird crop out. So what they did is they followed the Emery County boundary, which, as you guys know, a small portion of
Okay.
Green River City was annexed out and went to Emery. But as far as the major diversions and the major farms, they would fall inside of this council on the east side of the boundary.
I don't see anyone.
So are they part of the Price Conservation District?
That's what I was thinking, like we could get them through the conservation district. Yeah.
Yeah, we can get them through the conservation district,
Yeah.
sure.
I just think on that east side, the ones that come to my right are the east side canal, which are a big user on that side.
So what you're suggesting is somebody from the Conservation District that is in our area and lives up there should probably be on this council.
That or reach out, yes. So,
reach out.
or reach out, but I'm going wrong. I think someone from Green River should be on this council.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. So either from East Side Canal, Chris, the Dunham Farm, or,
Yeah, the material.
the old Battery Farm,
Yeah.
but now it's, the big one up on the bench, but someone
Yep.
in Green River should be here. Yeah. I think that would be wise.
But we could definitely get the survey, so that's based on almost what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, Green River Canal and things, they're on the other side and they're a West Colorado River Council issue, but
Okay. I can reach out to Chris. He's pretty good about the conservation districts. He always does.
Maybe it might be appropriate, if I'm thinking about this a little harder, is to ask them.
ask them who they want. Yeah.
Or ask them who they
Yeah.
want, but also ask them, would they rather be part of the Western Colorado? Because their neighbors are just across the way and they're all using the same diversion. And if that's what they want, then perhaps that's where you should go.
I'd be open I would love to see someone from Green River show up to this one or the other one. Right now, we don't have that.
Okay, yeah.
I'd rather have them invited to two.
Yeah,
Should go to one.
yeah.
Perfect. When I send that survey out, just as I'm thinking about that, and I don't recall exactly all the questions, I may send another survey for you to send to other entities so that we can, I believe we have some questions that are kind of specific to Watershed Council members, but I like the idea. If you all think you can get responses from shipping the survey out, then let's do that. And I think that will be helpful. So again, if you want to think it over and see what you might potentially want to be part of, again, I don't want either of those tasks to be, I know you all have day jobs, other things that, you're doing besides this. So I don't want either of those to be a heavy lift. You can always email me, you can call me, email Carly, but I appreciate your help. And I don't know how much time that you all would like to spend still on the state water plan. We can leave it at that, and you will get that survey and you'll have the opportunity to move the outline over. I also have some copies I can pass around. I will say it's about 5 pages, so it might be a little overwhelming to ask you all to look it over and provide feedback right now. So how would you all like to approach that? Okay, perfect. Awesome. Well, at the end, if anyone would like a paper copy, I have some. I'll just pass them around. If you'd like one, great.
Are there any other questions for staff? Okay.
Well, thank you all. I appreciate it. See if I can start. Yeah, go ahead.
So the next thing on our agenda, I asked Cash to come and give us, he's been really great in the past, giving us just a legislative update regarding water rights, anything water related. And so I shoved him into this. And then I sent him a reminder, I don't know, Friday night or something, and he was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I was like, oh man. But then here he is, which is pretty impressive. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay, that looks to be coming up okay. Hopefully it'll progress forward for us. So like I said, I'm Cash Stallings. I'm the regional engineer for the Regional Water Rights for this part of the state. Many of you have probably worked with in the past, Mark Stilson. He went and worked full time for the Colorado River Authority now. So I took his place. I worked in the region for 3 years under Mike, and then I went and worked in a different section of the division for about 2 years. And when Mark left, I came back. And so I'm the regional engineer now, and I was just asked to give a legislative update on some of the things that the division was tracking that actually passed in the legislature. So my presentation focuses on things that passed that have to do with water rights. And then on top of that, have some sort of applicability for this part of the state. So that's what we're going to focus on. Let's see if it works. It did. Okay. All right. So there are about 10 bills that I will briefly discuss today, and one budget item I think is worth mentioning. Let's advance. Let's see. Very strong lag time on our advancement. There you go. It is working. I guess it's better than not working at all though. Okay, the first bill we'll focus on is some state water policy amendments. This is an interesting bill. They went in and corrected a few line items, but they just tried to emphasize in this bill that groundwater quality is really important, that watershed activities that feed into drinking water systems are really important. They promoted state water planning in that bill. And then they talked a little bit about, being very sensible with our wastewater reuse. So there were a bunch of things that they crammed in this bill, but they took a piece of legislation that already existed and just changed some line items throughout the bill that helped focus on these 4 things.
It's a policy.
Yeah, I really think so. I don't know that there was anything groundbreaking that came out of it. Just, helping emphasize some things that they feel are really important. So let's go to the next slide. There it is. Okay. So this next bill are water right application amendments. So there, again, was a piece of legislation that was maybe a little too vague for people's comfort level. And this specifically had to do with the water right application process. And there are some specific deadlines in that process that you are expected to meet. And if you don't meet them as an applicant, there can be consequences from that. And so this bill just helped clarify that. It helped clarify when water rights were going to lapse, the process by which they could possibly be reinstated. And if they were reinstated, some additional actions that the state engineer could take, such as reducing your priority date. So this took any vagueness that was in the bill and helped clarify it. So there wasn't any question about why the state engineer was doing what she was doing. We'll see for this next one. All right. So this one is probably one of the more interesting pieces of legislation that went through this year that has to do with water rights. So for a long, maybe 15 years ago, there was this kind of odd bill that came through with what was called livestock watering certificates. And it didn't really make clear what those were or how the state engineer was supposed to handle them. And it was a big deal when the legislation passed, but there was only a handful of people that actually pursued forward with these livestock certificates. So this bill got rid of those because we didn't really know what they were. And then it also talked about 2 other things that have to do with livestock watering. So one is it made it possible for permittees, if they wanted to, they can file a non-use application with the state to have their water protected during periods of non-use, which again is kind of a vague term because you don't actually have to stop using your water when you file a non-use application. But it protects any part of your water that you do stop using or your water right in its entirety if you get the application approved. And so, for example, if the BLM or Forest Service, because we have a dry year, they cut the amount of livestock that you can have on the landscape. If you're really worried about that, you could come in and file an application and say, hey, I got cut by 1,000 AMUs. I want that protected. I don't want there to be any question that it's protected. And you could file an application with our state and request that portion that you're not using that year is protected. But again, I think it's important to remember with water rights that you have to not use all of a right or a part of a right for 7 consecutive years for there to be any question of non-use. But nonetheless, this opens the door to allow people to file non-use applications on their stock watering rights. Perhaps more importantly, what this bill addressed, though, was it gave the state engineer a lot more clarity and direction in what we're calling PWR 107 claims. So this has been in water rights, there are these things called Federal Reserve claims. And we've dealt with them before, but traditionally they've dealt more with when you set aside a tribal reservation, or you set aside a national forest service, national forest boundary, or you set aside a national park boundary, or even a monument. And basically what the law says is that when the federal government reserves a piece of land for a specific purpose, they inherently reserve a certain amount of water to meet the needs of that purpose. And it's between the federal government and the state to negotiate how much water that is to meet those needs. So that's the traditional perspective in which we have dealt with Federal Reserve claims. And we recently went through this process very successfully down on the Navajo Nation, or the portion of the Navajo Nation that's in the state of Utah, where we agreed upon and settled on an amount of water that was set aside for the nation when that Federal Reserve was made. Okay. This addresses a very specific one that is becoming a heck of a lot more prevalent, but we haven't dealt with before. And that has to do with an executive order that was signed by the president in 1927, I believe. And the claims that are being made when this executive order, they're saying when this executive order was signed, that the federal government inherently set apart a bunch of water all across the country for stock watering and domestic purposes. So again, we haven't dealt with those issues before here in Utah. So the state legislature wrote up into statute how the state engineer is going to deal with those type of claims. It sets boundaries and limits on how many can be filed within a certain geographic space, the amount of water, what the uses can be, but it makes it really clear for our federal partners, if you're going to file these type of claims with our office, this is the box that they're going to have to fit in. Okay. So that's something that this bill really helped to do. And like I said, it was probably one of the more important pieces of legislation for us that was filed this year.
So if I have a permittee that's running cattle, so that's just use Bears Ears for a prime example, and they've had existing water rights to Golden Spring or whatever places there within Bears Ears. You're saying that now the Forest Service or BLM has to file with the state for their claim?
So it should, yeah, it should be really, it should be really important. The federal government cannot file for water rights in the state. So, and that's been the way for a really long time. So, but the federal government has acquired a lot of water rights, especially on Forest Service ground, because by virtue of saying when we set the Forest Service ground apart, we set water apart for it. And that included for our herbities for stock water, right? But really, this has to do more with BLM water than anything else. And so the Forest Service does have a lot of stock water rights in their name. If they wanted to, they're the ones that could file these non-use applications. But interestingly, I believe the way the legislation is written, they have to get the permittee to agree to it. So they can't just do it on their own. And then if the permittee is the one who has the water right in their name, they're not going to have to go to the federal government for anything. They could just file it on themselves. Yeah. Okay, House Bill 89, water transfer amendments. All this did is that, and this is applicable for our local irrigation company that we have here. It eliminates the ability of shares of stock in water companies to be transferred by an affidavit. You can't just use an affidavit to say, I now own this share of stock. You have to have something more than that. My understanding is that it's trying to gear towards that. You got to deed water shares to people, right? Because water shares, unlike water rights, don't inherently go with the ground that they're used on. And so if you're going to pick up a water share, you have to have documentation that you were given or bought that share from someone. And all they're saying here is that an affidavit is not sufficient evidence of that transfer. You have to have something more than that.
Is it up to the company to decide what that is?
They probably could, yeah.
So can they get a replacement share of stock with an affidavit, or is that a separate issue? Same issue?
Yeah, I think it's the same issue. So it eliminates the ability for shares of stock and water companies to be transferred by an affidavit. Apparently an affidavit is not enough.
Okay. Is there something in there for when people lose their stock certificate?
Nope, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, good. That's good to know, because we run into that all the time.
So Kent, I believe, didn't this one also have an issue that the water companies, the irrigation companies were actually having to file a quit claim deed when somebody passed away and didn't say where their water shares were going? And this clarified that. Kent, your people need to put it in their will or you're in trouble.
Oh, I know. We've been trying.
That's a good question. We didn't get into that level of detail. We just got into the level of detail that you can't do it by affidavit. But you bring up a good point, Arnie, that maybe we need to look into that a little bit more. That quitclaim deed isn't enough.
I think that's what the guy at the water,
But
Watershed
water
Council
said,
was talked about that this, and the major reason why it went was because if you can't file a quick claim on more than $5,000 or whatever
oh,
it is, and the water company now was tasked with determining whether or not those shares are worth more than
oh,
$5,000,
interesting.
and they didn't want to do that.
Right.
So, anyways, just FYI, if you own water shares or water right, put it in your will or your trust or whatever. Otherwise, it goes to probate.
Yeah. Well, we see it in the will, we see it in the trust, but they lost the physical certificate. So I'll take this offline with you later, Cash.
Okay, that sounds great.
Thanks.
Good. All right, let's see, this next one will come through. Very slowly. Should have tapped it when we first started talking.
Naughty fish and call Elon.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice? Here, I'll stop presenting and present again and see if that makes it happy. Oh, it's funny, it shows on mine, but not on the big one here. I bet everyone online can see that it says House Bill 174, but we can't see that here. That is weird. Well, I'll talk about it, see if it shows up. How about that?
Yep.
But yeah, because I can see it online on here. Okay, oh. Edit it down? No, okay. So House Bill 174. There it is. Okay, water rights restricted account. So if you all can possibly imagine, the state engineer gets sued quite often. And then on top of that, there's a lot of legal things that the state engineer has to deal with when even making decisions before they get sued. So the issue is that the state engineer's attorneys are, of course, the Attorney General's office. Oh. Now it's really mad. It did kick me out.
Cash, come back.
I'll let you back in, Cash.
Oh, good. I'll try to get back in. Who would have thought? Let's do this. I'm on the same internet as everyone else. That's is that is that the problem? Here we go. We'll try to get back in. Apparently I need to take a lesson from Water Resources. They know how to do it.
Yeah.
He's like,
Send me your slides, Cash. I'll open them up.
He knows what he's gonna say.
I tried that earlier. I think that's why it's mad at this. Because I tried grand guess and I couldn't even get into the meeting. When I did. I'm sure when we present at MOP, it'll go better, Arnie. Don't judge me here.
I won't judge you here. Every time you presented at the MOP, it's always been great.
this Wednesday.
No, it's May 9th. Or is it May 7th? May 14th? May 14th, sorry.
Oh, sorry, no, sorry, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about today, and then I'm only a month off.
We'll try it this way now.
There we go.
Awesome.
Okay, so the state engineer has legal counsel that they need quite often. And our attorneys are the Attorney General's office. Most of the money, though, that the legislature, the vast majority, and I mean the vast majority of the money that the legislature has given the state engineer for legal counsel is purely only for adjudication. That our legal counsel is focused on when you're dealing with adjudication efforts, and very limited funds or anything other than that. This bill opened it up so that the state engineer can access legal counsel. I don't want to say all the time, but at least have a person dedicated to give legal counsel for all of the myriad of issues that they face, even before decisions are rendered, when decisions are going through problems and things like that, that she can have access to funds in order to get legal counsel outside of an adjudication process. And so that's what this bill helped do. Oh, look, it moved fast now. Okay, agricultural water optimization amendments. The Ag Op program has been a really big deal the last 2 years, and the state legislature has put a lot of money towards it over the last couple of years. So one thing that they did is they took that piece of legislation and they changed it just a little bit to help fund in a greater capacity 3 specific types of projects. So before, that program would do up to a 50% funding for the projects you proposed. If you propose one of these 3 types of projects, they'll fund at 75%. And so that's subsurface drip irrigation projects, automated surge irrigation projects, and measurement and telemetry. If you are proposing those type of things, they'll fund you up to 75%. And that's a big deal. That's a huge, big increase on what they'll fund. Okay. The next one, there you go. Okay, watershed amendments. So a little over a year ago, we had the State Department of Human Resources come to the Division of Water Rights and say, you guys cannot pay your river commissioners the way you are paying them and have been doing so for forever. Can't be done, doesn't follow the rules. We're going to have to change a ton of things about river commissioners and bring it up to standards. So our river commissioners exist on our established distribution systems. So there are areas of the state with high conflict. And so because they have high conflict, we have hired a full-time state employee, a river commissioner, to manage that river. And that river commissioner, who the person was, how much they're paid, and how they're paid was very much controlled by the committee that's established for that distribution system. And that's how it's been for a really long time. And like I said, human resources had a big problem with that because they're a state employee, but they're not following the standards that we have established for state employees. So there were a couple different bills that this issue was going to get resolved in, and it looked like those bills weren't going to make it to the finish line by the end of the legislative session. So this House Bill 311 at the 11th hour got filled with a bunch of things that people really wanted to get done by the end of the legislative session. And for the Division of Water Rights, that was one of these things. And basically what the code allows us to do is continue to work with our river commissioners and distribution systems the way that we have. And that the control of how much those people are paid, when they're paid, it remains with the distribution board committee that's established for that system. And it makes it so it's all okay now. The other thing that this bill did that was of interest is the state has a water agent. And currently that's the director of the Department of Natural Resources. And so that's Joel Ferry. But there was some state code that prohibited our state water agent from being part of the negotiations on our river systems that are multi-state. So specifically like the Colorado River and also up on the Bear River. That he could not represent the state of Utah in any type of those negotiations or really be involved in the conversation. This law got rid of that. He's no longer prohibited from being involved in those conversations. So it made it so our state water agent can be involved in our multi-state river systems and participate in those conversations. This one is an interesting one for this part of the state. So there was a bill that went through to address brine mining. So brine mining is becoming increasingly interesting and popular. And the thing was that in state code, we didn't really have established clearly regulations on brine mining, royalties on brine mining. So it was kind of out there out on the periphery, but the demand for it is ever increasing. And the brine mines are really particular. There's a lot of things they can target, but right now there's a big emphasis on them being able to target lithium, another type of metals that are in the brine and extracting it from it. So this bill had to set up an entire framework for brine mining. Mostly addresses the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining and their responsibilities with regulating brine mining. But it also talks about the role that the state engineer's office, the Division of Water Rights, will play in those type of applications to withdraw water, to withdraw water from these deep brine aquifers and what to do with them afterwards. So this was a very important bill, probably up there in our top bills this year to get taken care of and packaged and put out there so that we can continue to process these type of applications.
So before we move on,
Yeah.
like I'll just kind of give you it's maybe more of a comment / question.
Yeah.
So for example, this drilling that was taking place, basically kind of right next to the Green River and right next to the town of Green River, those water rights were in contention for a period of time because they were extracting that water from a certain level and they're saying it's non-consumptive. And then when it was injected back in, it's going back. Let's say it came out of 11,000 feet, they put it back in at 5.
Mhm.
And so I know that was in contention. And then eventually the state engineer released those water rights. But could you kind of speak to?
I
don't know
can't,
if you can kind of-
I can't speak much to that
Okay.
project specifically because
Right.
it's currently
Yeah.
in de novo review.
Okay,
So that means
that's
it's in the courts.
Right.
So I can't really speak much to that application specifically, but this bill, I don't want to say addresses those concerns, those
Right.
specific concerns, but addresses the concept in general,
Okay, great.
right?
Right,
Yeah, That's
yeah.
what this bill was geared
Right.
toward,
Okay.
was helping give more clarity to that specific
type of
issue that you're
stuff.
talking
Great.
about, but, and also whose responsibility is to regulate it
Right.
and things like that. Yeah.
And then and I think all of us know that, the Paradox Basin is quite rich in lithium. And so, these kind of concerns are going to be, on point or something that we're going to be dealing with. They utilize quite a bit of water. So just things that, and to me, like the royalty piece is a big piece, but that doesn't really speak to you, but, they don't really pay royalties. And so I think it's something that counties would be quite interested in, to make sure that if they're mining, that we get paid for it with it.
So yeah, I think this bill would definitely be a worthwhile one to review and see everything that they had to lay out, because this one, wasn't really, I don't know that it was so much an amendment. It was like I said, they had to start from scratch and give a whole framework.
We reviewed it a little bit here in Grand County. I mean, I made kind of generalized comments, but yeah, I think it was good. It was good to see it come through for sure.
Okay, yeah, this is a fun one. There's a lot of forms at the Division of Water Rights, and we require a lot of signatures. Up to this point, we actually only have one of our forms that still required a wet signature. And what was interesting is that form requires a couple signatures, and of the couple signatures, only one of them was still required to be a wet signature. This bill got rid of that. And now at the Division of Water Rights, all of our bills can be signed electronically. Sorry, all of our forms can be signed electronically. So that's what this bill helped do. This is the last item. So thank you all for being so patient and trying to get through this. So this is just a budgetary item that I know isn't specific to this region, but I want to use it as something to emphasize that is going on in your region. So the Division of Water Rights has a section called Data Services section, and it's kind of split into two halves. One is geared toward what we call water use reporting, and the other half is geared towards the Water Right Network, which is where I was for the 2 years that I wasn't in the region, was working on that team. And so the Water Right Network team has been focused on the Colorado River Basin. And they're doing a bunch of work to kind of create a one-stop shop for water rights and understanding what's going on. So basically, from an interactive interface, you would be able to go there and say, hey, here's the diversion on this river. Here is the conveyance system that moves the water, and I can see where that goes now. Here's the service area of that conveyance system, so all the fields and things that it waters. And here are all the water rights associated with it. Oh, and look, I can see what they're diverting right now. I can also look at the records and see what they diverted 5 years ago. And in one interactive slot, you can see everything that you want to know about what's going on. And this is geared towards helping us continually prepare for our Colorado River Compact negotiations. And depending on how those go, potential future curtailment that the state engineer would have to administer. So that's why this network's been built, is to give the public a really transparent, clear, easy place to look at things, but also help the state engineer prepare to deal with Colorado River issues. Well, the efforts of that team have been so successful and important enough that we're continually being asked, when are you doing this for the Great Salt Lake Basin? When are you doing this for the Great Salt Lake Basin? When are you doing this for the Great Salt Lake Basin? Man, we really need this on the Great Salt Lake Basin. So again, the legislature thought it was important enough that they gave us ongoing funds for 3 full-time positions to add to the Water Right Network team that would specifically work on Great Salt Lake and building out the Water Right Network on the Great Salt Lake. So the reason I, again, bring that up is just to emphasize that this team is already working and has been for a while here in your part of the state. They've just wrapped up a ton of work in the Uinta Basin. I would say on about 2/3 of the Uinta Basin, they just wrapped that up. They are now heavily working and wrapping up things in Carbon and Grand County. They'll then have to jump back to the Uinta Basin to finish up their 1/3 of things. But, Carbon and Emery County. But then they want to come down here and they're going to work their way through Grand County, San Juan County, and build out the network for there. So they'll want to work with our local irrigation companies and public water suppliers and make sure that they have mapped out appropriately the diversions, the conveyance systems, the place of use for all of that water, and make sure they got all the water rights plugged in. So that'll be an ongoing effort over the next year, 18 months. But that team will continue to work until all of the Colorado River Basin is done. So
That's what we're doing.
that's what I was doing for working up.
That's cool.
Okay. Any questions? Yeah,
House Resolution number 1,
okay.
the Grand County Water Conservancy District,
Mhm.
that was passed too. Which was pertinent to this group.
It was, yeah.
That was the resolution for, to have the ultra stuff transferred to there. Did you want to talk about any of the ones that didn't pass?
I didn't bring any of the slides for the ones that didn't pass, but there were certainly a lot of interesting bills this year that didn't quite make it to the finish line. But there were some.
One was going to require Ben to go, he saw a big uptake in use by one of his people, he'd be required to go tell them they got a leak.
That's true. And you know what? You remind me.
I know you're already doing that. But it would have been required, so to speak.
I think we missed this one, and this is worth talking about. House Bill 274. Let's talk about this one for a minute. So one way or another, we missed this one. There's been a really big emphasis on secondary water metering. And as you know, a couple of years ago, there was some legislation passed that if you were a tier 4 for greater county, if you were a secondary water supplier in a tier 4 or greater county, you had to meter everyone. And the state put up a little bit of money to help with that. But it's a big state with a lot of secondary water, and so the money went really fast. Now, I think Grand County falls out of this because I don't think you guys are a tier 4 or greater. But
The pressurized irrigation here is metered.
it's good for you, right? It's a good thing.
Is there a differentiation between shareholder water and just customers with a meter?
No, see, we have irrigation companies up in Carbon County who do fall into this. Who provide, they're irrigation companies, but they provide a lot of water to just regular Joe homes and then a handful of farms as well. And they are in the bucket of having to deal with this problem, that they're supposed to have a meter on every single connection that they've got. And so
The
that,
irrigation company isn't pressurized. Right.
Right. so it was a big problem, but what I'm trying to emphasize here, the other thing this bill did is it built on that. It didn't just, so we still have a bill out there that says, hey, if you're in a tier 4 or greater, you got a meter, sorry. But this built on it and said, and you have to offer tiered rates. So you can't just have a flat rate that everyone pays. You have to set up a tiered program that basically says the people that use more pay more and the people that use less pay less. So that was another requirement put on.
You guys already do that with a tier
On culinary
on
water.
culinary, but not secondary.
We're tiered on the irrigation too, but it goes the opposite way. The more you have, less you pay per.
Is that right?
The secondary water is tiered.
It's tiered, yes.
Tiers are big, but it's tiered.
Yeah.
But the people who have acre feet of water assigned pay. There's a scale there for whatever they call that.
Yeah.
The water users meeting in St. George a few weeks ago, this was the most debated issue in the hallway of the whole conference. And there wasn't one person there that's in the water business that didn't have an opinion about this. And I most certainly think this will be brought up in the next legislative session for a tune-up is what I was hearing down there. It's not making a lot of people very happy.
And I mean,
Let's put it that way.
my question, cash, is they threw money at it last year, is what you said, but did they throw more money at it?
No,
this year?
so yeah, so
Oh, right.
and really they threw the money at it 2 years
Oh, 2 years
ago
Okay.
and it went.
A lot of it was federal.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, it was a lot of money. It was almost $300 million that they threw at it, but it went really quick.
It's great to impose legislation that's not coupled with any kind of money to support it.
So
Really well.
I think that's a great observation. We'll see, the thought is that if you know how much you're using, I think, we're talking about where the bills came from originally. If you know how much you're using, you'll use less. And then this builds on that. If I charge you more for using more, you'll use less.
Ben's rolling his eyes, and you should say what?
Tiered rates can be $1 an acre foot more. That's the thing about this. It says tiered rates. It doesn't say what the tiered rates have to be. So be it. And that's a big issue. I mean, when you're talking about hundreds of acre feet in commercial farming, you can't do this when you're paying for some guy to water his garden on the same system.
Right.
It doesn't work economically. You'll put everybody out of business. And
Right.
that was some of the discussion with the larger farmers at that meeting. It's like, this don't work, people. Who dreamed this up? Some guy in Logan, right? As I recall. Enough said, but it's very contentious.
I know that ours, because we distributed the money, and we differentiate between ag connections and secondary connections. They're two different things. And so if we had a company that had, let's say, 500 homes, they had to have meters, but if you had 5 or 6 big farms, they didn't have to have them. However, if they wanted them just so that they could work, whatever, it was different. So even though they may share the same conveyance system, I don't see how a tiered rate could ever work for in ag.
Right.
And there are a lot of, I'll call them exceptions. There are a lot of exceptions, even the original legislation. even if you fell into one of these tier 4 bigger counties, they did send forth a path that you can follow where you can request a variance, and they put some specific things on that. Maybe they'll do that. You know, one thing where the state engineer gets roped into this and why I'm talking about is that they rope the state engineer in as the stick. So basically, if you didn't get your meters in, and there are deadlines, I want to be really clear, there are deadlines in the bill for when that has to happen. If you didn't get that in, or if you don't implement a tiered rate, the state engineer is supposed to act as the stick in the enforcement to make it happen. The other thing that was interesting is that if you wanted a variance, we got roped in on the variance side of things as well. We're the ones that had to come up with a form, and you submit your variance to us, and the state engineer makes a determination if you meet the variance requirements. So they roped us in that way as well. So that's the role that we play in this. And then, of course, Water Resources, when they had funding, was the one that was controlling the funding and could administer the funds.
As soon as I looked at it, there was also a part that in your tiered rate structure, you also had to report on how much of that tiered rate additional funds went towards conservation efforts. I was like, I want to go around a shovel again.
So Arnie, I'm glad you reminded that because somehow we missed that slide. So that was a good one.
So I got two things more to go on this. I was at the water conference too. And the one guy gave a pretty good presentation, and he had this nice piece of paper that had all the bills associated with water in the law that passed and the ones that didn't pass. And he's got a brief little description of each one of them. If somebody wanted to make some copies of them or wanted a PDF of them, I could probably send that to you. Okay, most of you have my email address. Okay, I thought this was very, very helpful to me in terms of a piece of paper I could go back and look at. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you, there was another heated discussion at one point in time about groundwater management plans. And the heat was generally about how, when these do come around, how are we going to enforce them? And the bottom line was first in time, first in right. You will get time. They won't cut you off tomorrow. You're going to get a whole lot of time to make that happen. But the bottom line was first in time, first in right. You may get 10 years to curtail your use, but your use will be curtailed. And that was a contentious with a lot of obviously people in place. The other thing that was interesting about that was there was one groundwater management plan that wasn't required for UDWR to do, but it was written this last year because is it 40% or 25% of the water users? I got it written down.
Yeah, I'd have to go review the bill, right? And I talked a little bit about that one, Arnie. So there's a piece of legislation, our folks over in Castle Valley have been aware of this, and it's been a state statute for a long time, but basically the state engineer, the statute says forward when the state engineer shall implement a groundwater management plan. And it has to do when the aquifer has exceeded its safe yield and either the physical or chemical integrity of the aquifer is in jeopardy. And that has been the typical way that we have established groundwater management plans in the state. And we do have those established. They're primarily down in southwestern Utah, in the Cedar City, Enoch area. But there's a lot of conversation out in the Avant Valley, so out Holden area. There's potential conversation even out in Beaver area, things like that. So there are plans that the state engineers implement, but the state code also talks about, and maybe already found the number.
Yeah.
How many of the are
1/3 of water rights holders, and that's not wet water, that's paper water.
Yeah, and the other thing I understood too is it's not the number of owners. We're talking about like the volume.
Volume, yes.
So in the particular instance that Arnie's talking about, there were only 3 water users that had to sign because they represented more than 1/3 of the volume, just those 3. So if 1/3 of the water users by volume, paper water, petition the state engineer for a groundwater management plan, again, the state engineer has to pursue that and see what that would look like and see if it's necessary and follow through with it. Like Arnie said, our experience with the groundwater management plans that have been implemented, you end up establishing a committee or a board to help, because you end up basically you're making a groundwater distribution system is what you're doing. So you end up establishing a committee, and the committee and the state engineer work together to come up with a groundwater management plan. We have some statutory things that we have to follow, but obviously we want to work with the water users and come up with it. And of course, the water users always want the longest amount of lead time they could ever possibly get before curtailment starts. I think some of the plans that were originally submitted to us, it was like in 100 years, we'll start curtailing at this rate. So anyway, it's a back and forth. It's a negotiation between the state engineer office and the water users to come up with a plan that works. But like Arnie said, currently in state statute, and I think this is more important than groundwater, because it's also established, I just want to be clear, if there's curtailment on the Colorado River. So curtailment, period. Currently in state statute, the only tool the state engineer has to administer curtailment is priority cuts. Now, could the state legislature potentially change that? Sure. But the way state law is written right now is we do priority cuts, whether that's a surface system or an underground system. We do priority based cuts.
Where is it that they petitioned you? Where state is that?
It was down in Washington County around Sand Hollow. Yep. So Sand Hollow is, its original intent was just to be a groundwater recharge basin. And so the water users down in that part of the state who have more than at least a third of the groundwater rights petitioned the state engineer for a groundwater management plan. So it's in that Sand Hollow area. That was a pretty, I agree on it. That was also pretty interesting to hear about.
So are there questions for Cash? That was great.
Yeah.
I think it's really great always to have that update.
Okay.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, so the last thing that we have is just kind of any roundtable updates. So if we want to go around, if there's anything people want to share, kind of what they're up to within our watershed, please feel free.
Well, I'm gonna ask water resource people here, what's her name? Candace, is that her name?
Yeah.
She gave a presentation, of course, and she's always a very good speaker. She said that water resources now has some planning grants for water conservation, if anybody was interested. Historically, water resources hasn't had a lot of funding to throw around. But they do have those. And the other one, they said they have water resources has grant money for water development at this point in time. Is that true? She didn't say anywhere where you could access that. She didn't talk about that.
I have heard talk about it, but I don't know that I can speak to the specifics, but we could find out and get back to you.
I can absolutely, get info from Candace and send it out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I
You
believe
said for infrastructure development or?
Water development was, I think, the exact words she used. The infrastructure stuff, there was a bill passed on that infrastructure stuff that doesn't really apply to us at this point in time.
I'll follow up with her for sure.
Ben, do you have anything? You have city? No? Matt?
No, Cash kind of alluded to it last month, I believe it was a month now. We did finally get through the water adjudication process for the Navajo Nation, for water rights to be transferred to the Navajo Nation. So we're glad to see that finalized, because then that would, the next step for them, for the Navajo Nation, would be getting into the actual water projects, water distribution projects for those Utah chapters, those communities that lie from Utah itself. And so we're excited for them
That's cool.
to finally get that piece. Other than that, just kind of similar, like Arnie had mentioned, watching the stream for any opportunities for water system infrastructure development. I know that some of the requests, Monticello City still continues to work towards finding funding opportunities for their secondary water system. So we're kind of still heading that direction with Monticello City, trying to just find the resources so that they can move to the next step. That may be going to CIB if not possible, but it seems like there is a lot of water infrastructure needs that continue to exist. Spanish Valley is one of them that is also looking at increasing infrastructure, improving infrastructure there. So it's good to hear about these opportunities, but if there are any that are out there, let us know and we can push that out to the body. So it's important that we get on there. As you look at our resources and probably across the board, we look at the dams on that dam list that the state of Utah created. You know, some of these dams are aging out and need either retrofits or improvements made on those systems. One of them that we continue to discuss is recapture dam for us. A lot of it is along the highway itself. We continue to have problems with highway UDOT because of there's a spring underneath the highway there. When they built the dam, the reservoir there, that still continues to be a thorn in UDOT's side with the road itself, where that spring is leaking under there. There's probably about 6 to 10 feet of asphalt that's pressing down on that spring, and it continues to create a problem in that clay. And so if there's any opportunities out there that you see of those, let us know and we can, like I said.
Is the dam on the impaired list?
It is on that. They did kind of an assessment of all the dams throughout the state of Utah, and recapture is one of those.
Because there is money at Water Resources for dams that are at the.
I believe
They're on that
that was mentioned somewhere. I don't pay much attention to dam safety, but I thought that was mentioned that.
Yeah, they are dam safety grants.
They
There's
are,
just
yeah.
not a lot of money. So everybody that's on the list, if you added them all up, is like 50 million times more than what they have.
Yeah.
With what happened to the, whatchamacallit dam 2 winters ago. Yeah.
Yeah,
That got
Tangled.
bumped up the list.
Right. Yep.
But they kind of come up, and I'm pretty sure that the dam safety lets you know that you're up to get the money, and
Okay.
it just is a process, but it does happen.
Okay, we'll pass that word along. Other than that, that's all
Okay.
I could think of for.
Heidi, do you have
Well,
anything?
the agricultural and the animal, runoff's 15% normal. We're all really hurting. And it's not like we haven't been here before. But it just seems like, of course, these events are closer and closer. So everyone's really hustling their water. And of course, then that also translates on the mountain. The springs are going producing. So, yeah, it's like you heard it. Hopefully, someday.
Right.
Not really updates on that note. Yeah, there's a lot of, we're looking at a 30-year average most of the time when we look at the papers, and we're actually at like an all-time drought of a 40-year average. So I've just been telling producers we're not as good. I mean, they know we're not as good as what the paper says we are. You can look at the south side of the LaSalle's and the Abajos. There's like one snowdrift on the Abajos. There's nothing on the south side of LaSalle's. We're pretty low on snowpack. So as far as water flow, it's really going to affect us. And then just a couple of thoughts that I had, maybe you guys can like mull them over. But I was thinking about this after our last meeting. We're talking about ways we can hold water, especially in those big flood events. And I was looking at so we've got a lot of farmland up higher and properties up higher on the mesas, and probably also on the Abajo areas. That their water connects to those main streams. They pull their water off those main streams. Maybe that's an outlet we could look at for retention, holding water. Like we know that there's a flood coming. Hey, you guys, open up your water upstream. We can slow the flow a little bit downstream.
And then a couple other things like, just maybe guzzlers, maybe more of those for wildlife is something that we could kind of push, and especially in some of those ravine areas where they're pulling a lot of water in a short amount of time. But we could use that water for something local. Just thoughts that we're mulling around.
I know they put a ton of guzzlers. I don't know about Elk Ridge area, but I know in the book list, they've done a ton of infrastructure guzzlers, but I don't know around your area. Is there a few? Yeah, in that country.
Well, and on that, I mean, maybe that could be something that they could work together with stock ponds too, because their retention.
Bill, do you have anything?
I'd like to follow up on that infrastructure money we were just talking about. We've got issues in Thompson Springs, Crescent Junction, Cisco, that all could benefit and some of that, so definitely include me in a follow-up. Yeah.
Okay.
That's all.
At some point, you just have retention ponds. We were all ready to do 2 more retention ponds on Indian Creek and, environmental structures. One person. So that's a real, we're having, where we could put these ponds and get the cattle further away from the creek and when they're stopped.
I think what we're looking at is just multiple purpose for those ponds. It's retention, it's a stock pond, it's a wildlife watering, it's soil conservation. There's a lot more purposes than just one.
And to get the wildlife and the cattle away, rather than different.
Right.
Gary, do you have anything?
No, probably the big issue at the moment out Grand Water Sewer is we're pushing more of a conservation program for culinary water. We've got a committee formed. We're going to try to get some education going. We've got some plans. We've implemented tiered rates. We'll increase tiered rates again, I believe, but that's going to be a big push for the next year, and we'll see where that goes. We're going to ask for some help from people for education. We'll see. We're getting a little results with our tiered rates, probably a few percent of less use.
Are you getting some results?
Yeah, what is the number, Ben? 10%?
That's good.
I think somewhere in that area.
Yeah, so 10% is a huge number in culinary. We'll see. It's going to take a few years to trend that out.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're working on that.
Lexi.
Used to be like more residential, but the city is working with the local scoops program in the state to have a training on the 25th of April for people who are interested in qualifying for the incentive to replace turf landscape with something more water-wise. I can send information if anybody's interested in that.
No.
I got one other thing. We're all the way around the room.
Yeah, you are.
What?
And then I'll get people online too.
Oh, no, okay, go ahead and go with this.
Okay, let's go. Ken, do you have anything you want to share?
Yes, please. I'd just like to report that we were able to get our diversion dam repaired enough that we were diverting water on time on March 15th. So we do have water in our pipelines.
That's so great. Awesome.
It was quite a prodigious effort on the part of a bunch of people, and we appreciate the help we got for, with materials and hauling things and things like that. We aren't done. We are diverting water. We do not have enough riprap in place. And one of the things I wanted to do is see if anybody had any extra rock, or know of a good place to get rock cheap, because we're kind of broke right now. We just spent a lot of money. And we probably need another 3 good sized belly dumps of riprap rock where we meet Mill Creek. So if anybody knows of something, we sure appreciate some help.
Ken, have you had any discussions with Sitla regarding your riprap and your rock?
With who?
Sitla, the School of Trust Lands.
No, we haven't.
Okay, I can send you their contact information and reach out to them. We've reached out to them before in the past with riprap.
Cool, I appreciate that.
Leticia, do you have anything?
Maybe, hello, this is Letitia, the Water Resource Director for the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. And the only update that I have is that we've been actively working with the White Mesa community on our water rights settlement. We attended the Blanding Irrigation Company meeting, so we're looking more to be active in Utah. But yeah, we're pretty soon we'll be, contacting interested parties in our settlement. So just be on the lookout for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy, do you have anything?
Hi there. No, I don't have any divisional water quality related updates, but thank you for the opportunity and thanks for all the information presented earlier in this meeting.
Yeah, and then Lori, do you have anything you want to add? Well, if there's nothing else at this time, Arnie? That's right.
So, I gotta bring it up that we have a lot of farmers in here and there was a lot of science at the Water Users Conference. And the fact of the matter was that all of the federal employees that were giving that science were on their own dime and taking a chance just going. And we may be losing the USGS here. So the Department of Interior and the Department of Ag are pretty important to this county and to San Juan County. And the NRCS office on the Hatchet 2 is another one. I don't know whether this entity would like to speak to our representatives about that at all. But I will let you know that if things don't change, we will be losing services and we will be losing money and we will be losing people and we will be losing partners. Okay. Anybody else want to comment on that at all?
No, I have an agenda item at our commission meeting to write a similar letter that Moab wrote to address the closures of some of the GSA buildings. So yeah, anything that we can do, we will continue to do.
One of the people that works down here a lot, Jordan, well, works with us. He's not down here a lot, but Jordan Clayton. Get the lake levels too. He was down there on his own. He was doing presentations, and he is still employed, but they no longer authorize overnight travel for any of their people. So to go down there and spend 2 days in a hotel, whatever, it's his money that he was spending, and we were grateful that
They are dedicated public servants. There's no doubt about it. I've been in public service for 40 years now. So it strikes me a little rough at this point in time that people I have been working with for 30 years are having difficulties keeping themselves showing up to work, much less anything else.
There was a difference in the water conference this year. In a lot of the speakers that couldn't make it in this class. And I really noticed the quality. I thought, wow, this is important.
We did have one more thing because we keep talking about tours. And I mean, I don't know if we want to speak to that or if we want to just keep it in mind. If there's anything that, folks, if you want to stew on that and send something out, if there's any projects or areas that we think would be interesting, let's just kind of keep that in mind or throw it out now. And we've talked about it, but I had the pleasure.
Maybe when we get to the basin part of this, maybe that might be a good idea for us to have a little tour and talk amongst ourselves.
Okay. Yeah.
That might be the push to make that happen, Trish. I know they expect this to happen.
Yeah.
Okay. Most of us spend enough time traveling around our basin, I think.
Requirements.
Yeah,
but
just ideas. Yeah.
I think if you're gonna pick something for this year, though, it'd probably be better to put it on the calendar.
Right. Okay. Let's just keep stewing on it. All right. Well,
I just maybe wanted to give a couple things that came up during the State Watershed Council meeting last week.
Yeah.
They had Steph present on the state water plan, and just, reemphasized that this could shape policy. So this is your time to make your basin chapter useful to you guys. They had someone from the Drinking Water Source Protection Program come and present. She's really interested in working with the local watershed councils since it's your drinking water. So if you guys ever wanted to have her come to a future meeting and talk about that, she said she would love to. And I'm happy to get her contact info. Okay. The other thing is there was a little bit of discussion on the soil conservation districts, or I guess they're just the conservation districts. And they noted there's probably a lot of opportunity for this body, like the watershed councils, to work with the conservation districts. So just a suggestion. I don't know if anyone here is on one of the boards. Or
Yeah, we're almost on it. So yeah.
Perfect. Okay, yeah. Oh, you are too. Okay, great. Yeah. So they just noted there's probably a lot of opportunity for you guys to support them. How can you interact together are good discussions to have. And then I have one more.
On that note, I would say, kind of to tie to what Cash was saying earlier, Green River is a separate conservation district.
Okay.
Because the Grant County one kind of goes, it includes Pat Creek Ranch, and it kind of has a weird straight line down. It's weird. And then Green River is kind of both sides of the Green River, but it doesn't follow the watershed boundaries at all. So that might be something that this group wants to, especially what Cash was saying, approaching the conservation district.
And then lastly, they just talked about, there's a couple councils who are trying to decide, what their mission and purpose is. I know that's a recurring theme in all the councils. So I guess they didn't say, here's your mission and purpose. They said, maybe everyone hates it, but maybe you want to write a mission statement, or maybe you want to invite another watershed council to get together and say, hey, West Colorado, we all share the Colorado River, could we work together on that? So those are just some of the discussions they had.
Okay, cool. I'm sorry I skipped you.
You're right.
Jack, do you have anything? I skipped you too.
No, not this one.
Can I add a little? So I work with a lot of you. I know this is a very proactive group. So I think that's a really good thing. But I just want to build on that, like the state legislature and certainly the state engineer's office is taking these watershed councils very seriously. So this really is an opportunity for your local region with whatever boundary you were given, whatever boundary you're given, to really take advantage of an opportunity to highlight to the state legislature things that you want funded, right? And we have a very diverse group here. So I think there's maybe things you as the thing that you're representing really want funded. But I think if you can collectively come together as a group and say, for our region of the state, what projects could we bring up or issues that we could bring up that are going to affect the most amount of people or the greatest amount of water or whatever, but pick a criteria that's important to this council, right? And then between your state water plan that you're working on here, really highlight those. I mean, again, we could probably come up with 50 projects, but can you pick 2, maybe 3 that you're like, for our region, if we even got one of these, that would be huge for the people that live here, right? So use that as an opportunity to highlight that. And then on top of that, you have the water infrastructure list. Water infrastructure plan. That there's an email going around for that, right? That's an opportunity to put any and every project that you want, right? But you have this state water plan to really highlight this region's needs, and you guys can come together. And as a council, I really think you should be thinking as a group, as a collective, what do we want to highlight to our state legislature and say, hey, this is going to help us the most on, and I really don't know, right, but the Colorado River, Moab, Spanish Valley, right? Monticello, Landing City.
Can we put that on the next agenda, Matt?
Yeah,
Try and narrow that down. I think that's a great idea.
Got that question go on there?
Yeah, like it's kind of, and Arnie does this a lot, right? But as a council, kind of come up with your selection criteria, right? The things that are most important to you. And then as a group, bring all the ideas, but let's see who ranks the best in that selection criteria. And let's highlight those, right?
Could we get the survey results that Steph will be sending out?
I know, that might-
Collectively,
Yeah.
Right.
with them,
Yeah.
and see what is priority and what's not.
Yeah.
It'd be great to have that full list.
Yeah, I think that helps develop the mission as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we kind of,
Yeah.
just comprehensively add it all together, then it should speak to what we need.
Yeah, I think when that survey comes out, give everybody a couple of weeks to fill it out, and then I think that sort of subset, that subcommittee can look those over and kind of lead that conversation of these were some general themes. But certainly, we'll be sharing the results out with you all, with our state agencies.
That could also be a good way of checking, does the survey catch everything?
Absolutely.
If there's anything missing.
All right, well, thank you so much. And I will adjourn this meeting at 11:35. Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.